Power Play is such an interesting episode of Cheers. There are several new things that we don't have in season one. But I will say, for me personally, I don't think it took the best direction it could have done. So I will say there will be spoilers from now because I have some thoughts that may spoil some things. So there will be spoilers for this episode and certainly the previous episode, which was the last episode of the first season. Power Play is the first episode of season two, which is quite exciting, mostly because that's one season closer to Rebecca. But there will be spoilers for this, but not for anything that happens after this episode. So, quite interestingly, this picks up where the last episode left off. And it's not the only show to do that, but I honestly feel like there should have been some passage of time because I feel like we might have been slightly further forward in Sam and Diane's relationship. However, at the same time, I think they did this to show that their relationship was very peculiar from the start because there's a lot of uncertainty in this episode about their relationship. They're constantly bickering still and kind of on tenterhooks watching it because every sentence that comes out of Sam's mouth upsets Diane, and everything Diane says Sam just doesn't know how to respond to, and it's really awkward and uncomfortable. But that is kind of the exact way to describe their relationship as well. But I have to say, having some of this, in fact, a lot of it, set in Diane's apartment. Actually, before I move on with that, I will say Shelley Long's hair was definitely shorter than it was at the end of the last season. I don't know if I'm just seeing things, but I'm pretty sure it was shorter. Of course, this is easy to spot when you are now streaming things and you can pause and look back and do a side-by-side comparison in 1984 when this was released. Not really an issue. Nevertheless, the fact that this was set largely in Diane's apartment is very different because the first season was set in Cheers. And this is both a good and a bad thing. I did feel the absence of the bar. I was missing Norm, missing Cliff's Cliffisms, and missing, Coach's warmth and confusion and Carla's, well, Carla's everything. But at the same time, being in Diane's apartment allowed to dig a little deeper into her character, such as the stuffed animals, which I thought was brilliant, particularly with what Sam did ultimately with those stuffed animals. It played out fantastically. And I feel like it's definitely a pro and a con. It's a sign that the show did really well because they have the money for other set designs, which is pretty great. It was definitely an interesting choice to not show us inside the bedroom. Even when Sam and Diane are in the bedroom, we as viewers are on the outside looking in. And this is definitely how it feels with their relationship. They're very much together but apart. And this is, of course, throughout the entire first season as well. They were always together but also worlds away from each other. And not being in that bedroom, not seeing that level of intimacy, kind of also suggests that maybe we're not allowed to see that because we're not allowed to get that attached to Sam and Diane. Now, whether or not that's relevant for future episodes, I can't say, but this is certainly how I mean, I don't know how I read this episode the first time I saw it, but certainly reading it now, trying to analyse it without knowing what happens next as much as I do, that's kind of my reading into it and what they were trying to convey. It also could just be they had the money to build Diane's front room, but not the bedroom. I don't know. But it was definitely very different, and again, a good thing and a bad thing. I will say this episode seemed a little bit too much after the previous episode. I just want them to have some pleasantries between them. I want them to be nice to each other for more than 3 minutes. And I will say that their relationship could potentially wear quite thin. It's really hard for me to talk about this without mentioning things that happen in the future episodes. But having just watched the previous episode about an hour before I watched this one, again, this is, the episodes are victim to advances in technology, whereas there would have been a good number of months between the two episodes. But I really just wanted them to get on and get along and agree with each other for at least 5 minutes. But that just doesn't seem to be happening. It's a very unpredictable episode. It's very uncertain what would happen next. It's also unclear what direction the show is going to take at this stage. Are we going to step away from the bar more frequently? One would hope not. But again, there are benefits to getting a deeper, more personal relationship with the characters when we see them away from the bar and in their own personal environments. It's an exciting time. Season 2 is off to a very interesting start. This is, of course, still directed by James Burrows. I also feel like this episode didn't do a perfect job at saying that Sam's misogyny, basically, and desire to control Diane, and Carla's advice, interestingly, I don't feel like they completely squashed that. I feel like that theory that some women do want to be dominated, but I feel like that was still a little bit too much on the surface by the end of the episode. And again, a product of its time. Cheers does have the occasional episode that hasn't held up as well. I don't think the episode itself hasn't held up as well, but certainly I feel like that message could have been a little bit stronger. But nevertheless, Power Play is a really interesting episode. A solid, if unpredictable, start to the second season of Cheers.